Hello folks, it's Rob, and this is Kerbal Space Program, but instead of my science campaign, this is a video that comes off of a recent conversation with a cousin of mine, and he said, and I mean, he's a very smart fellow, that he doesn't really know what's going on in Kerbal Space Program. He has a copy of the game, but he doesn't really play it because he doesn't know what to do with it. And I'm like, well, maybe I should do something to help out, because really it's can be quite a complex geeky game, I admit, but it also isn't that hard to get into once you know what you're being shown. So this is going to be a basics video, okay, and for those of you who want to see lots of exploding things, I do try to put that in for, my failures video, and if you want to see the science campaign, I'm sorry, this isn't a science campaign video, it will be, that will probably be made next, so, and who knows, depending on how that goes, you might get in our failures video. So, what we have here is the opening screen for Kerbal Space Program, and you can start your game with basic settings. I mean, come on. I'm hoping that you've played games before, folks, and that you have an idea what you're doing here on a menu like this. The spaceport is where you can go and get your mods and meet the community of people who play Kerbal Space Program. That's the official community spaceport right there, the KSP community. So, but what we're really getting into is the game. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start a new game so I can show you things I wouldn't otherwise be able to show you. I'm going to start with the sandbox so I can show you some essential concepts. Okay? Now, again, you can customize your game however you want, but I'm just going to get right into it. Right, so here we have the basic space center. Okay? Now, this is the launch pad. This is your space control center. This is your research department. This is where your Kerbals are recruited and managed. I mean, basically, this is the tracking station. Okay, this is where your aerospace happens, and that's more advanced. We're going to come to that later on. This is where your basic rocketry assembly building, and that there is really where mission control is. Okay, so let's go in here to the central building. That's the construction building, the vehicle assembly building. And here we have the floor of the vehicle assembly space. And you can see, I think that's Dr. Werner von Kerbal walking by right there. And we have scientists, and we have mechanics, and they're all just nice puffy bits of window dressing. You got to start somewhere. Okay, and the starting point for building a rocket is some form of guidance. Okay? Now, the most common form of guidance that you'll be playing with is the command pod. And this is basically a control tin can which holds one Kerbal and allows you to go into space with that Kerbal or wherever you want to go. Okay? Now, if you need to move this around, you just simply left-click on it, pick it up, drop it. Okay? Left-click to pick up, left-click to put it down. Simple enough. If I need to change the orientation of an object, I have W, A, S, D, Q, and E. Okay? So, let's say I wanted to, for some reason, stick this module down here upside down like this. I can totally do that. Okay? Alright. So, and if I want to get rid of the component, I just pick it up, drive it over here to the gray, and that's it. It's gone. You hear a little crinkly noise. It's gone. Okay? But these components are simply enough to get a hold of. Now, in sandbox mode, everything is unlocked, and you have all the components and all the options. Okay? So, everything's available to play with immediately, and that can be a little overwhelming because there are an awful lot of parts, and there's constantly more parts. And, I can totally see how you might find that a little daunting. okay? And you're like, what does this do? What does that do? How does this work? So, really, I understand that whole kind of thing, because I had to get through that too. And some of these things aren't quite what you might think that they are. Like, this is our utility heading, and this isn't actually an engine. It's not under propulsion, it's here in the utility section, because it's a very special kind of engine. It's an electric ion engine, okay? And this is a xenon container that works with that engine that you use to fuel it. But also, its main fuel is actually just electricity. So that's a very special case. But just to say, sometimes things are a bit not where you expect them to be. And unfortunately, this game is still in development. Okay, things are subject to change. This is as of the 0.22 release with the science update. So we have all these nice nifty science packages that actually do things in the campaign mode, where you unlock various aspects of parts so you can use them. And I mean, here's aerospace parts, and it doesn't matter whether you're in a rocketry lab or whether you're in the aerospace lab, you're looking at all the same parts. Okay, folks? Now, if something's grayed out, that just means you can't put it out yet. Okay? As you can see, I have no cockpit out here, so that means I can't put a ram air intake. You can't start with a ram air intake. You can basically start with a cockpit. Okay? You can also start with certain fuel tanks. I would suggest starting with the cockpit. Now, let's build a rocket. So here we have, and I'm going to build a very basic rocket. Here we have our command module. I'm going to go to structure, and this here is a stack decoupler. Okay, let's stick that on there. And this here is parachute, and I think that's the big one, so I don't want that one. I want this one. Nope. See, even I get lost. There we are. That's the one I want. Okay, that's a basic parachute for re-entry. And as you can see down here in the lower right-hand corner, we have the capsule and the parachute. Okay, and if I move my mouse over them, the various components are highlighted on the build. Okay, and there's the Cybertron. Okay, so this allows us to decouple the cockpit from the main body of the rocket for recovery, because eventually we're going to have expended our rocket and we don't need to bring it back, honestly, and that means this little parachute only has to carry this Kerbal and Kerbal can, basically. Now, let's stick some rockets on here, because, I mean, this is Kerbal Space Program. You want to have some fun. You want to see rockets. So, these are fuel tanks. They range from the super jumbo to the pretty darn tiny. You know, what you want to do with them. And not all fuel tanks are the same. Like this here is an RCS fuel tank. Use that on RCS systems, not on main propulsion system. Right? And you're like, hey, what's an RCS system? Right? That's to deal with control. These are these thruster blocks. Okay? Or thruster ports. And monopropellant is basically just compressed gas that allows you to exert force in a direction. Okay? You're not actually igniting anything with a thruster. It's just simply pushing you with kinetic force. Now, because we're in sandbox mode, we have lots and lots and lots of options again. But because you might want to be playing in like, you know, campaign mode, here's like your first fuel tank. Okay? And if you wanted to build a rocket, you could build without the components that are unlocked later on sandbox mode. We can totally do that. In fact, I will probably do that for you after we're done with basics. So I'm going to just grab a fuel tank here. There we go. And I'm going to put an engine on that. Now we have all kinds of different engines here. Differing sizes and capabilities. So I should take you through a bit of it. See here, like, this is our Skipper liquid engine. This is a great, big, massive engine, as you can see. And it has a lot of power. As you can see, maximum power is 650. ISP at sea level, ISP at vacuum. Now that effectively means efficiency of the engine. Okay, so this means that this engine is more efficient in vacuum than it is at sea level, but it isn't terrible. Okay, you want to see a terrible engine at sea level? Here we have the atomic rocket motor. That's 220 at sea level, but 800 in vacuum. It is amazingly better in space. It has only a maximum power of 60 though, so you're going to need something else to get that up into space in the first place, because it doesn't carry a lot of power. Without power, you're not going to get anywhere. Okay, this engine here, 215 power. This engine here, 200 power. This engine here, 220 power. As you can see, they vary in power capacity and output. Here's our mainsail liquid engine. That's the biggest engine you can mount, the most powerful engine you can mount. It is 1500 power, but its efficiency at sea level is 280. It's in vacuum, it's 330. So if you can get this engine with fuel into space, you can really move something. And even if you can't get into space, you can really move something because it has 1500 power, but it blows through fuel like you might expect. Meanwhile, here we have basically one of the smaller standard size engines, and that has a power of 50. So this engine has power of 1500, and that engine has a power of 50. But its efficiency at sea level is 300, and its efficiency in vacuum is 390, so it's actually very nice as a final stage engine, especially for, like, say, landing on low gravity surfaces and things like that. We also have even a tinier engine. We have this little Rockomax one here, and that one is 300 and 350 on efficiency, and its power is 30. But because it uses so little fuel, you can make long differential changes. This is great for probes or for landing stages. And then we have different kinds of engines that we can mount. Instead of the ones that we stick on the bottom, we have ones that we can stick on the sides. And this is called radial mounting. And as you can see, this kind of just sticks onto the side of the thing. And here we have some modes, okay? And this makes things a lot easier for you, because this here is called symmetry mode, right down here in the left-hand corner. And that is bilateral symmetry. Okay, so you get 2. Trilateral symmetry, so you get 3. Quadrilateral symmetry, 4. And then it goes to 6, and then it goes to 8. So if I want 8 of these things mounted on here like so, that's all you need to do, right? And they just go on there. Simple enough. And if I want to take them off, just take them off. So, you can see we have different kinds of radial engines, and they have different performances, just like the other engines do. Okay? And, you know, like if I want this, that's probably the biggest radial mount engine I could mount. Then there's this is probably the tiniest standard engine I can mount. Then there's also turbojet and toroidal aerospikes. These require atmospheric air to work, so you can't really use them on rockets, but they do work great in atmosphere up to a certain degree. Much better for your aerospace projects. Trying to make a starter stage using turbojets and things like that is fun to experiment with, but doesn't really get you anywhere in my experience. Right, so back to building a rocket. Well, the last thing you need to know about engines at this stage is that we also have solid fuel boosters. And what we're going to do is we're just going to put a little... Actually, before I put that on, I want to mount an engine on there. I never did mount an engine on there, so there we go. And there we go. As you can see, when we put a Sepratron on, it puts a little housing over the engine, and that's just more cosmetic, really, but it's nice to have. Now, we're going to attach a solid fuel booster to the bottom of this, and they come in a variety of sizes as well. Here we have the big one, here we have the regular one, and here we have the tiny one. And depending on what you need from them, you should choose your options wisely. This tiny one can be useful, especially in low gravity or in combinations. I don't like using solid fuel boosters where I can't get rid of them. You want to be able to lose those things because they are dead weight when they are done. Okay? But right now we're just going to mount this big one on here. Now, as you can see here, its engine power is 315. Efficiency at sea level is 230. Efficiency in vacuum is 250. It's not a very efficient engine. The engine cannot be shut down. The only way to get be done with it is basically to eject the engine. Okay? Now, this is a very basic rocket, and this is a fine starting point for experimentation. So we're just going to take that one out. If you want to title it, you can title it, and you can save it to your designs. But I mean, this right now is very simple. Now, launching meant pressing that green button in the upper right-hand corner. We've since moved the design out to the launch pad, and as you can see, it is now just sitting on the launch pad. Because this is a fairly lightweight and simple design, it's not in any kind of trouble. It's not going to fall over, it's not going to blow up, it's not going to collapse under its own weight. You need to watch out for that kind of thing with bigger, more complex designs, but this will just happily sit there on top of that solid fuel booster, just sitting waiting for things to go on. Now, over here you can see our staging. This has been correctly set up automatically because of the way we built the rocket. So we have here at the first stage our solid fuel booster, then we separate, then our liquid fuel stage engages, then we separate that off, and we're left with the capsule, which we can engage the parachute at any time. Okay? Now, some controls, because you don't know what probably to do with this, and it's not all that apparent sometimes. To throttle up the liquid fuel engine, hold down your left shift key. To throttle it down, hold down your left control key. You may want to disable the sticky keys option on your computer if you have one, because that does cause problems if you don't have it active, because it's going, hey, 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 what are you doing? You're holding down your shift key repeatedly. Now, as you can see, we have a little indicator on here indicating our thrust. You can go all the way up to the red line, you can go all the way down, but even down here it's still technically throttled up. You can hit X to kill the engine. Okay. C takes us from into the cockpit, and we can get a Kerbal eye view of what's going on in here. And actually, you can modify the thrust control here by just simply grabbing it. If you'd like to have that kind of first-person experience. Hitting C again takes you right back out again. R activates RCS. If you have it on board, that will allow the automatic computers to control RCS to stabilize the system in the direction that you have it currently pointed. T activates the SAS, which is our stability system, and that's actually built into the cockpit as a basic item. See, reaction wheels are operational here. And that's essentially the gyro system, and that helps keep us pointed in the direction we want to go and stabilized. Otherwise we might spin, we might tumble. It allows us to have more control over the vessel and keep it stable, but it requires electricity and power to run. Now here's our resources. As you can see, we're currently 49.93 out of 50 electric power charge. The capsule has no way of recovering power at the moment without the liquid fuel engine running. If I had mounted a solar panel or something onto this, or some battery packs, we might have other resources. At the moment, you can see we have our solid fuel, we have our oxidizer and liquid fuel. Rocket engines require liquid fuel and oxidizer. Because in space they don't have oxidizers, of course. And don't be offended, Chris, but I mean, I know I'm making this video for everybody, so you know, I know you know stuff like this. But let's take her up, shall we? So we've activated our automatic controls. Here we see Jebediah sitting down here very happily. And, you know, if you're playing the science campaign, you can get a crew report. And it's of various value. You know, with the R&D facility closed, it's hard to tell what any of this means. Because this is sandbox mode. Jebediah seems keen to get started. You can do an EVA, right? And on the EVA mode, you can get a crew report from the EVA mode. And you can get back in again by hitting F, as it says here, F to board. Don't get out of the craft while it's under thrust. Your Kerbal will fall off. Don't get out of the craft while it's under a parachute. Your Kerbal will fall off. Don't get out of the craft while you're undergoing re-entry. Your Kerbal will fall off. Right. Let's start. So, to activate a stage, all you need to do is press the spacebar. This activates the first stage of the rocket, which is in this case this large solid fuel stage. We're climbing vertically, which is just fine. Normally, when you're trying to achieve orbit, you're going to want to climb to about somewhere in the 10,000 meter range to start angling over to the 90 degrees here on the ball to start efficiently moving your velocity over into a horizontal. But right now you don't really want to be fighting the atmosphere. Thing is, this rocket's never designed to go to orbit, but it will get us up into space. Now you can see we're fighting the atmosphere there. Now I've hit space again to eject that core, and I'm now activating the liquid fuel drive if I wish to. This here is, I've pressed M to take us out to the Space Center, and this allows us to see our current trajectory. So we are now, apoapsis is basically the peak of the of our flight pattern, and we're approaching it rapidly. So I'm going to prepare for that. By using the WASD keys, we can manipulate and maneuver our vessel, and we're using gyroscopes to do that right now. I've moved it over to 90 degrees, and as you can see, our velocity has fallen to nearly zero. By activating our engine, we're now accelerating, and you can see this yellow marker here. That's our direction of travel. There's another yellow marker on here. It's also the opposite of our direction of travel, and those are handy for navigation purposes. By navigating like so, we're now throwing our vector, this force, directly into our path of travel, and this allows us to extend our arc out forward in front of us. Okay? By kicking it back a little, we might be able to use some of this force to gain altitude. It's a basic Newtonian. You know, you got your force coming out this side, you're going in the opposite direction. So, as you can see, our velocity is accelerating because we're throwing a lot of our force out behind us and pushing ourselves forward over Kerbal. And you can see the angle is just like way out there in front of us, and we keep pushing it. And actually, apoapsis is kind of climbing back up behind us because of our angle. And this is us suffering atmospheric effects from our speed. We're actually undergoing re-entry speed here at about 17,000 meters. And I've ejected the empty liquid fuel engine. And here I am spinning the craft. And you can spin it in a variety of fashions. Again, it's the WASD, Q and E. Q rotates, E rotates. You know, if you need to be able to orient the craft in a certain way. Here is the other symbol I was talking about. This is our opposite of thrust. And this is our thrust direction. Okay, so here we are angled opposite to thrust. And as you can see, our ejected engine core is just flying away off there in the distance. It's going to crash into the surface and destroy itself. Jebediah is enjoying his little trip. I like to deploy the parachute somewhere below 10,000 meters, so we're fine right now. The parachute will engage properly at about 5,000 meters. But it will start slowing us immediately, and that helps make it easier. Don't use time acceleration while you're undergoing your parachute, as quite often the physics engine will cause things to rip apart. If you show off the RCS and the SAS at this stage, it will no longer be fighting the force of the parachute, and in my experience will make for an easier landing. Plus conserving resources. As you can see, we've been using power, stabilizing by using the gyros to keep the cockpit in that position. Now we're coming down, and we're coming down okay. You know, it's soon enough the parachute will fully deploy, and we'll go even slower. Oh, that was the engine light hitting the water. There we go. And you can see our surface speed is now below 7 meters a second, which means we're going to survive the impact with the surface, and that's fine. That's great. You're going to get your Kerbal back. You don't always have to get your Kerbal back. You know, it's Kerbal Space Program, and a lot of people have fun with mayhem. But I'm showing you how to do a space mission, basically. If you just want to blow stuff up, please feel free. It's not wrong to do so. In fact, it can be a lot of fun. And certainly I find iterative experiments trying to make things work to be entertaining, as you just keep doing things over and over again until they work, with modifications. And that can be very, very useful. But also very entertaining, as I've shown with some of my aerospace experiments. So, now, you're very tempted to go and accelerate time at this point, and you probably can once the parachute's fully deployed, but I like to just write it down because it's safe. And I don't want to lose my Kerbals. And there we go, splashdown. And again, for science, along the way, you can get crew reports while you're in the atmosphere, while you're in flight, while you're on the ground. You can get an EVA report here on the ground. You can get an EVA report in space. If I let go down here, I probably won't be able to get back in. But, you know, it's you can get the EVA report by right-clicking on the guy and just getting an EVA report. F to get back in, of course. Again, the gyros are still working. So, I mean, as long as we have power, we can do all kinds of fun things with the gyros. Not that there's much point, but I can make Jebediah probably pretty sick. Woo! Anyhow. As soon as there's no power, we lose that ability. But, we're done with that. Now, as you can see, this is still orange here. That's because we're still throttled up even though we don't have an engine. So we just hit X. And now it's not orange anymore, and we'll be able to go back to the Space Center. We can also revert the flight. Now, if we revert the flight, we can go back to launch. Let's say we made a mistake somewhere along the way, and we want to give it another go with the same build. Or we can go back to the vehicle assembly building, because we want to make a modification of some type. Like, say the thing exploded after launch, and you decide it needs some structural bracing. So, those are handy things. But if you're happy with the actual flight that's happened, just go back to your Space Center. Which takes us back to the Space Center, of course. And then, if you want to get back the landed vehicle, the flight, the vessel, you can go here. It says Untitled Spacecraft. It shows it on the globe, or wherever it is in the solar system. And it's currently there. And you have 3 options. You have Recover, you have Fly, and of course you could actually just go, if it's like a drone, you can just tell it, nope, I don't want it anymore, get rid of it. So, flying means we go back, and in this case, because it's already a landed splashdown craft, I mean, you can see it splashed down here, we just go back to the cockpit, which is floating in the water. So, let's recover this. That brings it back, and normally you get your science report at that point on any science that was recovered. And that's if you're playing the campaign mode. Right, so, back out of that. by pressing the orange button in the upper right-hand corner. And here we are back at the Space Center. So, that was some essential basics to getting yourself a rocket and what we're doing here. I'm now going to go ahead and make a part 2 where we go into some more advanced instructions on like actually getting something into orbit and playing around with campaign mode. So hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found this useful, folks. I know this was very basic to start with, but I want to be able to have anybody to be able to pop in and just like pick this up and say, "Hey, thanks, Rob, for telling me about that. I didn't realize." That way you're not having to pick it up off the streets like I did, kids. Alright, so that's it for this one. If you want to carry on with some more advanced stuff, we'll be carrying on in video 2, which will be next. Thank you for watching, folks. Bye!